intro here, and then we'll get you going.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is the July 2013 HR That Works webinar, and I'm absolutely pleased to have with us Jim Cusimano, who's going to talk about engaging employees through work-life balance. You know, we have a lot of our webinars are on the hard side of the law, obviously a lot around the Affordable Care Act, which was suspended for a year. But I like to do things on the other side. I like to talk about the culture of things. I like to talk about work-life balance. I think that people are most productive when they're in work-life balance, and to have them out of that is not sustainable. So as you know, over the years, we brought on guests like Jim to deal with what I would call the soft stuff, the people stuff. And I love bringing on successful people. Jim's had a very successful career because we can all learn from their success and understand how it can apply to our own. So with all of that, I don't want to take up any more of Jim's time. Jim, welcome. I'm sure you're going to let them know a little bit more about your background.
Thank you very much, Don. It's actually a genuine pleasure to be here, ladies and gentlemen, and to share with you some thoughts that are very special to me. And my passion at this point in my life is really to take what I have learned over the years, over decades actually, and share it with other people in hopes that it could make a difference in your life. Let me tell you how this whole thing started in terms of engaging employees. I've been interested in the subject my entire professional life, but about 3 years ago, I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and I read an article by Gary Hamel. Gary Hamel was arguably one of the most recognized strategists, corporate strategists in the world, and he's written a number of books. And he was reporting on a number of studies, including Gallup polls, as well as several by major consulting companies. And he pointed out, when he talked about employee engagement, that it follows the 80-20 rule, that only 20% of employees are actually truly engaged. Now, I'm having trouble, Don, changing my slide. What do I do here, my friend?
That's on your end. You just push the arrow button or click onto your slide itself.
Yeah, I did, and I'm not sure why. Okay, let me see. There we go.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, Gary pointed out that only 20% of employees are engaged. The other 80% vary between collecting a paycheck, just going to work to collect a paycheck, to outright disdain for their employer. And I found that really incredible, and it really bothered me a lot. So I decided to write a book and to share my thoughts on how to find balance and fulfillment in both your personal and your professional lives. Because I found that by doing this, the objective is happier people are more fulfilled, they have a higher employment enjoyment, and it's a win-win situation for both the employees and as well as the corporation or the business. So my objective today is to share with you insight on 3 decades, actually probably 5 decades of professional working, but 3 decades of founding and building public companies. One of them went from a $30,000 investment by myself and 2 partners to $1 billion value on the NASDAQ in less than 5 years. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And the other thing I would like to do is, based on what I've learned, is to provide tools for you to find your own personal fulfillment if you haven't already, or to help others, because that's part of this whole business of employment enjoyment, to help others find theirs, because it has a tremendous, powerful impact on creating a successful company. All of this I have shared in the book that I have written, and it's available in as a soft copy book, or even as an ebook from Kindle and others. And if you go to either one of these websites, www.balancethebusinesslifeconnection.com, that's the title of the book, or if that's too long for you, www.jamescusimano.com, you can find out everything about the book and where to buy it and all that sort of thing. Now, I want to give you an idea of my own credibility in what I'm about to tell you. and it is based on a lot of experience, and it didn't happen right off the bat that things worked out well, but it was a learning experience. I had two passions that I learned about before I was 10 years old that I wanted to follow in my life. And in fact, I believe that many of us know what our skill set and what our capability is when we're very, very young. We don't think of it that way. Sometimes we're talked out of it because other people think it may not result in a very successful career. But I learned two things that I was interested in. One was entertainment, and the other was science and technology. And in terms of science and technology, or in terms of entertainment, I should say, my mother thought that I had a pretty good singing voice and that I was good at music, so she encouraged me to take piano lessons. And to make a long story short, living in New Jersey, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, right across from Manhattan, I started a band playing for high school proms in the late 50s and early 60s, and very quickly started writing songs and selling them in Manhattan, rock and roll that is, and eventually found myself as the lead singer of a group called the Royal Teens. And those of you old enough to remember that, it was a group that recorded in 1958 a record that sold 2 million copies called Short Shorts, and it's been used for the Nair commercial and many other things. So that was kind of my first life. And so my colleagues at that time were people like Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis, all of these, and many of the what are called doo-wop singers from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Los Angeles, Chicago. I traveled with them all around the United States. But I had a second passion, and I discovered it with a gift of a chemistry set for Christmas on my when I was 8 or was 9 years old. And after I went through all of the shenanigans of making stink bombs and fireworks and rockets that boys do, I started in the cellar of my home, where my parents were living with my grandparents. I started making cosmetics and perfume and that sort of thing. Checked the book out of the library. Started selling these things in the neighborhood, and I found out that people were willing to pay for these things, and the money was important. But what really excited me is that somebody was interested in buying something that I created. And that's when I fell in love with technology. So those are the two things. Entertainment and technology have followed me through my entire life. I eventually went on to get a doctorate at Rutgers in physical chemistry, studied some business at Harvard and Stanford, and then went to Churchill College at Cambridge University in England, and eventually settled down as a research scientist for Exxon. And I happened to be there at the right time, was promoted to director of research, and I stayed there for 7 years. And wonderful teaching. I enjoyed it very much, but I became very disenchanted with the bureaucracy of a large corporation. And I'm not saying that in a denigrating way. I'm just saying it wasn't for me personally. That didn't fit my culture. And so I left with a couple of friends and went out to Silicon Valley and moved there and started companies. And a couple of them became public companies. They were under the guise of Catalytica. Catalytica, we were experts in catalytic technology. So we started a consulting company called Catalytica Technologies to generate revenue. We then moved into Catalytica Energy Systems, generating or developing technology that was green at the time and was technology that could generate power without any pollution. But the big one that became very, very substantial for us was Catalytica Pharmaceuticals. It grew in less than 5 years from 4 people to 2,000 people. And we took it public on the NASDAQ, and by the time we sold it to one of our biggest competitors who made our shareholders a deal they couldn't refuse, it had a value of over $1 billion. So there I was. We had sold Catalytica Pharmaceuticals. I was still on the board of Catalytica, and at that time moved from Palo Alto, California, where I lived, down to Southern California in a small village called Ojai near Santa Barbara. And my wife was a screenplay writer, and she had written a screenplay for my middle daughter, Polly, who's an actress, Polly Cusimano, now Polly Cole, in Los Angeles. And I thought, well, I really need to help my wife follow her dream. She wanted to make a movie, and it was called What Matters Most. Paramount wanted her screenplay, but they didn't want Jane to direct the film. And so I said, Jane, I don't know anything about movies, but let's create a movie company, and we did. And we went out to the panhandle of Texas, and there we shot the film. But 2 weeks before we left to shoot the film, Jane came down with stage 4 breast cancer. So we both knew that this was a challenging thing for her, and she probably would not make it, but she chose to go ahead and make the movie. This is those two folks are the stars. That's Polly Customano, Polly Cole now. What Matters Most was the film, and the name of the company was Chateau Wally Films. What Matters Most, it was released in 2002, and I, at the suggestion of Sherry Lansing, who was then the CEO of Paramount Pictures, who liked the movie but couldn't take it because the actors were not well known enough, suggested that I submit it to film festivals, and it was the winner of 5 international film festivals, so I thought it must be good. So eventually reached a deal with a company in Los Angeles, and it was released in more than 50 countries. Unfortunately, after the movie was completed, Jane got to see it, but she lost her battle with breast cancer, and we kind of knew that was going to happen. But it was a wonderful legacy for her. There I was sitting in Ojai, California for the next 2 years and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And one day, a friend of mine came to visit with his wife, and his wife is from Slovakia. And they were both living in Los Angeles. Her girlfriend from Prague was visiting, Inez. She got out of the car, and I immediately fell in love with her. I tell you, this is the truth. And I got on the next plane 2 days later, and I went to Prague, and I stayed there. And we got married 2 years later, and actually have my third daughter. So I've got 3 daughters, 46, 36, and 6, which is quite an interesting spread. But Inez had bought a rundown castle, a chateau in the Czech Republic, and we decided to renovate it and to convert it into a spa hotel and forest retreat. And it's called Chateau Metseli. It's become, since we opened in 2006, the premier castle hotel in all of the Czech and Slovak republics, and as I would say, one of the top in Central Europe. We have an award-winning restaurant called Piano Nobili. We have an award-winning spa called Chateau Metseli Spa, and an incredible park that surrounds the chateau. So these 5 areas: rock star, corporate research executive, entrepreneur, filmmaker, holistic hotelier, which is what I'm doing now. These are the 5 areas where I experimented and I learned about employee engagement. And this was my platform. This was actually much more important than anything I ever learned in business school or any of my technical education. So today what I want to share with you is I want to tell you what I learned about personal and professional fulfillment. And it's critical. It's absolutely critical, both in your personal and obviously in your professional life. And it's actually the key to building a long-lasting and successful company. So with that, I pose to you the ultimate question. You know, I once read an article, there's the 2 most important days in your life. If I were to ask you that, what are the 2 most important days in your life? One of the answers you probably would give is the day you're born, right? And some people might even say the day that they pass away or die, but it really isn't. In my view, it's not the day you die. It's when you figure out why you were born, what is your life purpose, what do I want to do with my life? And you have your life, as you know, is divided into two pieces, personal and professional. And they're linked. No matter how you try to separate them, they're linked in some way, shape, or form. And in order for you, at least from my perspective, what I have learned, to find fulfillment, long-term fulfillment, you can find instantaneous fulfillment in your personal or your professional life for a very short time. You can buy a new car or a suit or a dress or whatever, and you feel good for a few days. But to find long-term fulfillment, you really need to have balance in your life. Now, first of all, what do I mean by fulfillment? Well, for me, fulfillment is a state of mind that's characterized by feelings of contentment, joy, and satisfaction. I suspect you probably wouldn't argue with that. I think even if you go back 3,000 years, Aristotle, if you read some of his works, he found that people try to seek happiness and fulfillment with money, beauty, power, sex, and that works for a short period of time, but it never works for the long haul. Even Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our president during the war years, his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, she was quoted as saying, you know, happiness is not a goal, fulfillment's not a goal, it's a byproduct. You got to do something, and that something, I would tell you, is finding and following your life purpose. So,
say just a quick question, Jim.
Yeah, sure.
Just for timing purposes, I think we went a little bit past that first polling question.
Sure,
So,
we can inject it right now.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say, for those of you listening, the question is: the percentage of employees who are not engaged in their work is 15, 20, or 25%. Now, those of you voting, you've got 1 minute to vote, and then we'll share the results. And somebody wrote that they love Eleanor's memoirs. Okay, so right now we've got 20% in the lead.
Take off again.
Yes, I will. We've got 20% in the lead with 25% in second place. And again, you may recall that he did discuss this early on. Not a trick question.
One of my opening slides, right? I know it was a surprise to me when I learned the percentage of people that were basically not engaged in their work.
Oh, it's that's that Marcus Buckingham stuff, that Gallup poll, and it launched an entire career and an entire conversation, didn't it?
Don,
so let me share what
one
the
of the things
were.
I do know. I have the percentage of employees who are not engaged in their work. I have a typo in the document I sent you. Without saying the number, it's the opposite number. The number that I gave you is the number of people who are engaged in their work. The number who are not engaged, you have to subtract that from 100%.
Okay. I think that might be a little bit of confusion. So I think the answer that we're after was 20%. Those are the people who are engaged, meaning the other 80% are not. So let's hide that. And you have the screen again, and we're at long-term fulfillment.
Okay. So in terms of long-term fulfillment, to do this, I maintain, at least from my experience with myself and with numerous executives in the companies that we have built, and actually talking to other folks, you need to follow your life purpose, and balance is absolutely necessary. There's a quote that I remember reading in an incredible book, which I've probably read 5 times, which is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. In that book, the king of Salem, talking to Santiago, who's the protagonist in the book, a young boy, he said to the young boy, he said, Santiago, you have succeeded in discovering your personal legend, meaning your life purpose. It's what you have always wanted to accomplish. Everyone, when they're young, they know what their personal legend is. I knew it before I was 10 years old, and I would propose that most people, they know what it is when they're young, but sometimes the machinations of life, the way we work and what people in our society, what people think is important, can help us to forget about what that real critical piece of that life purpose is. But it's never too late. In the book I've written, I show you how you can rediscover it, recapture it. And when I say it's never too late, remember that Ray Kroc, who founded, the multi-billionaire who founded McDonald's, was 52 years old when he started McDonald's. Colonel Sanders was 65 years old when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. So it's not too late ever to find out what your life purpose is. Now, what do I mean by balance? I think that's important to define. So what I mean by balance is, first, you have to have an optimal effort in both spheres, both your personal and professional life. And you need to get a desirable return in both of those. These are returns that both you want in both your personal life and your professional life. One can't sacrifice at the others. Now, it's absolutely, at least I have never seen anyone been able to do this without what I call a values-based life plan. And you'll find many people who say, well, work-life balance, never happened. Well, these are people who don't believe in balance. They've never experienced the power of a values-based life plan. And what I mean by a values-based life plan is the following. There are 6 areas that are important to you personally. Without even meeting you, I know what they are. And they are these 6 areas: professional, finance, relationships, spiritual. Spiritual doesn't mean religious. It could be anything that's sacred to you personally: health and knowledge. And what I have done in the book, and one of the most important chapters, is to show you how to find out truly what are your personal values in each of these 6 areas. Not what you think your values should be, not what somebody else thinks your values should be, but deep down in your soul, what do you really think those values are? What are they? And then how to set goals in each of those and to put together a time-managed 3-year rolling plan. And I can tell you, and I have one of my plans that I've given openly in the appendix of the book, I can tell you that in setting these plans, you may not achieve the goals you want in absolutely the exact timing, but you will achieve most of them, if not all of them. And I can, in the appendix, I show you how that happened for me. Now, what about the path to fulfillment? Now, stay with me on this, because this may be a little bit abstract, but this is how it all happens. When you're born, when you come into this world, you personally have something fundamental that you're good at, probably better than most of the people around you. And when you're young, you know what that is. It may be sports, it may be math, it may be reading, it may be numbers, lots of things. It could be dancing, whatever it may be. You're good at it. And when you identify a need in the world and you put that capability together with that need in the world, that makes the world a little bit better. It doesn't have to change the world profoundly. You have found your life purpose. And when you find your life purpose, it develops incredible passion. Now, some people will say, well, God, I'm really great at sports, but, I'm not good enough to be a world-class athlete. Well, maybe you like sports so much that you would like to start a sporting goods store or become a sports announcer or a sports agent or something like that. So it doesn't mean that you have to really dig deeply into your soul to figure out how do you take that capability, connect it with a need in the world that makes the world a little bit better, find your purpose, and that generates this passion which creates tremendous energy both physically and emotionally. In fact, so much energy, and I can tell you firsthand because I've experienced this so many times, you'll forget to eat. You'll go with less sleep. And when you do that, you have incredible creativity. And if you're in business, that creativity can lead to innovation, which means doing something special that adds something of value and brings back a return. And that return could be financial, it could be spiritual, it could be physical, emotional, whatever the return may be, or some combination of all of them. And what you'll find is when you get that return, you feel very grateful. You can't help but feel gratitude. And gratitude is the fundamental source of all long-lasting fulfillment. That's what I found in my interviews with lots and lots of executives who have been successful. I've never seen a violation of that. Now, because of our timing, I want to move to the second piece because it's all related, and that is 8 steps to corporate success. If you've got a small company or a big company, you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur in a larger company, these 8 steps, I can guarantee you, they will help you create, without question, a successful company. And I don't care whether you're starting a company in Jersey City, New Jersey, or Beijing, China. All of these 8 steps, if you follow them, they will lead to corporate success. I've seen it over and over again. As an example, it's not really experience. It's really finding your essence, finding the essence of letting your employees find their essence, their purpose, their passion. That's really what counts. And fulfillment is, the fulfillment path works. I had no experience in filmmaking, made a successful film. I've had no experience in hotels, in restaurants, in spas, and Chateau Mazzelli is one of the most successful holistic hotels and spas in all of Central Europe. And that's because of the essence, the purpose, and the passion that myself, my wife, and all of the employees here have for this particular enterprise. So let's look at these 8 pieces and see what they are.
Hey, Jim, just quickly,
yeah.
Again, just remember the polling kind of thing. When did you want me to ask the question about the key to long-term fulfillment?
Okay. So we can do that right now.
Yeah, because I think that was the timing you intended. So let's launch that.
Go ahead, Don.
Very simple question here. The key to long-term fulfillment is to follow your life purpose. True or false? And while they're answering that, Jim, I just keep smiling. You know, they've heard me talk about life balance. I've got the 6 things you have -1. I didn't add the knowledge. I've got the other 5 on my balance wheel. You know,
Sure.
And I love Paulo Coelho, and I've read The Alchemist plenty of times. But from one of his most recent books, one of my favorite quotes of his is, "Only the mediocre are truly comfortable."
Yes, exactly.
I love that one. Okay, I love that one.
No, that's perfect. You know, he's an incredibly incisive guy. The reason I've read the Alchemist so many times, between the lines, some of the quotes in there are so profound.
Oh yeah.
They really they really make you think, and they really have an important message. And all of his books are that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we've got, it looks like everybody's going to vote it. 100% of you said true. You got that right. So there it is, the response. Let me hide it. Let Jim get back to doing his thing. There you go.
So the number one thing to building a successful enterprise is you've got to have inspired leadership, not just the CEO. It's got to permeate the entire organization. And what to give you a sense of what inspired leaders do, in my view, you have to look at yourself. Yes, you may own the company, or you may be the CEO, or you may be the general manager, but your purpose is to serve all of the others in the enterprise. You are a servant, and I'm not the first one to say that. You also have to have found your purpose. You have to be really, really excited about your own dream within the enterprise. And I don't care whether it's a beer company or it's a biotech. You can always find a way to form a mission or a vision or a dream that really makes a positive difference in what you're doing. You then have to be committed to all of the stakeholders, and I'll come back to that later because that's another one of the 8 elements. I don't mean shareholders, I mean stakeholders, and we'll talk about that. And finally, you have to be compassionate. Compassionate because you'll be faced with lots of tough decisions. You'll have to walk through fire for your employees, or you may have to do something like fire people or have layoffs, and you have to do that in a way that's very, very compassionate. The second thing is, going back, you have to create a dream. It has to emanate from the leader. It can't start from the middle of the company. The leader or the CEO or the manager has to have this dream, and you have to be able to say to yourself when you look in the mirror, or to say to the people that work with you on your team, you can change the world for the better. What we do at Chateau Mazzelli, we're not just a hotel. Our vision is to make a positive difference in the world by helping and making a positive difference in the clients and the employees that work here. And that's what we do. And we believe it. You have to have a strategy, which is a stretch plan, but it's got to be believable. It can't be in outer space and something that can't be done. You need to have passion that penetrates the enterprise. And, you know, it's hard to have every single employee in a company passionate, but you've got to aim for it. You've got to try to develop an environment where passion is what really creates the success in your enterprise. And you, for God's sakes, got to foster innovation. Let me say a little bit, before we go to the number 3, let me say a little bit about innovation. You know, there's one thing, and this might have been a good polling question, but let me tell you what the answer is. There's one thing that's consistently the #1 indicator of employee engagement and employee enjoyment, You know what that one thing is? Answer it in your own head, and I'll tell you what it is. It's organizational trust. When you find a company where there's trust that goes throughout the organization, you will find a very highly committed company and an innovative company. Let me. The other thing is you have to have a strategy that requires innovation. You can't make things so simple. It's got to be something in your stretch plan that requires you to innovate, and it's got to be something that makes the world a little bit better. Whatever you're doing, that's really what people want to do. No matter who you talk to, no matter what they say, every single person who's normal in this world that's born wants to do something that's going to make the world a little bit better. The next thing is you got to have employee autonomy. I don't mean you let employees do anything they want, but you got to give them, look, here's the circle of things that we need to do. I'm not going to tell you how to do them. These are the goals we're after, and I'll check back with you, and if you need my help, let me know. But that's what it is. And you've got to tolerate mistakes, not stupid mistakes, and not mistakes that are made over and over again by the same person. You've got to tolerate mistakes, and you have to reward innovation. Let me say something about mistakes. In 1928, there was a chemist by the name of Roy Plunkett. He was working at DuPont. He was working with Freon gas to make a refrigerant for new refrigerators in 1928. He got a bottle of this gas, Freon, and when he opened it up, nothing came out. So Roy decided, I'm going to cut this cylinder open and see why no gas came out, because when I weigh it, it has gas in it, but why is it not coming out? When he cut it open, he found this white waxy material, and it was Teflon. It was the discovery of Teflon, which made billions of dollars for DuPont. In 1974, a gentleman by the name of Arthur Fry, working for 3M, discovered a useless glue. When he put it on paper, he could paste it on something, but then the paper would come right off. But his office mate, Spencer Silver, said, you know, Art, when I go to church on Sunday, we have 15 or 16 songs we sing. I'd like to get some of those papers so I can paste them in my songbook. And so it won't wreck my songbook, but I'll be able to get to the songs real quickly. Spencer Silver invented Post-it notes, multi-billion-dollar business for 3M. Now, my company, Catalytica Pharmaceuticals, had a $15 million investment from Pfizer, so I knew Pfizer very well, knew the employees very well. And in 1994, two fellows by the name of Nick Terrett and Peter Ellis were testing a new drug molecule that they thought would help them. It was called sildenafil, that would help heart disease. It would bring more blood to the heart. And what they found is when they did their clinical studies with about 500 men, that it did bring more blood to an organ, but it wasn't the heart. That was the birth of Viagra. And so mistakes, what mistakes? So that's why I think we have to be able to tolerate those kinds of things. Number 3, hiring right. This is really critical. It's one of the most difficult things to do, to hire the right person at the right time for the right job. And when you make a mistake, with compassion, to let that person go as soon as possible, or find another position where they are in the right position. Now, how do we learn to do that at Catalytica, or how did we learn to do that? How do I do it now at the company that I'm with now, with the Shesto Mizzelli? The first is you have to have a dream, and you got to present it to the person that's interviewing. Look at their reaction to the dream. That tells you a lot. The second is ask open-ended questions, not real narrow yes or no, open-ended questions, and see how they answer those questions. I want to know what's the most important thing that ever happened to your life, and how did it change your life? What's the worst thing you had to deal with, and how did you deal with it? Why do you want to work for us, and what do you bring? Those are the kinds of open-ended questions that make a positive difference in discerning whether that person belongs in the organization. And you're trying to make a decision not just for yourself, but for them. You don't want somebody joining the company who shouldn't be there because it's bad for them as well. The other is multiple references, not just from their boss, especially in the United States. Because of legal situations, you'll always get relatively either neutral or positive responses, but try to get references from people who work with them at the same level, and the best references are people who worked for them. We always used psychometrics. These are where we did testing on people before we'd hire them, and it would be an entire day of testing, not so much to test their IQ or their EQ, is really to see if they fit with us culturally. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was at least some data. The other is team interviews. We always had a number of different people, different skills, interviewing the person from various teams, and then sharing the information. And then finally to interview the candidate in informal settings, because in multiple informal settings, because often when you take them to dinner and that sort of thing, you ask the same questions over and over again, you get slightly different answers, and that helps. So that's number 3. Number 4 is to address the growth market. Catalytica, we made a mistake, a big mistake, $3 million mistake once, and never again. We were developing a new process to make a chemical called acetaldehyde using a catalytic process. And it was very, very sexy technology. Our scientists really fell in love with the chemistry and the engineering. And we approached the largest acetaldehyde producer in the world. And that company said, boy, that sounds interesting. Why don't you work through the lab? And then, and they didn't pay anything. And then they said, well, you need a pilot plant test. And we did a pilot plant test, and that worked out well. And they said, well, let's put it in our plant, see how it works. And we did. And by the time we were finished and they looked at the royalty they had to pay, they said no deal. So we had wasted $3 million on something that had a very small growth rate. And so that's not what you want to do. You want to be working on things that either have good growth rate or will be a completely new market. Now let me contrast what we did at Catalytica with Apple's iPhone. In Q3 2007, the iPhone was released. In Q3 2009, 2 years later, the profit, just the profit in the iPhone division alone was $1.6 billion. Nokia, the largest phone company globally, had a profit of $1.1 billion. So there was almost a 50% difference. Apple was almost 50% better than Nokia. But here's the numbers that make these astounding. Globally, Nokia had 35% of the market. Apple only had 3% of the market. And that's what happens when you address a growth market and you create a completely new product. Actually, the iPhone created an entirely new market. So you had Nokia with 12 times the global market and Apple with a 50% greater profit margin. So that's number 4. Number 5 is focus, focus, focus. Now, you've probably heard this before, but we learned this early on, 1983. What we found that would help us really focus is to form multidisciplinary teams. Otherwise, people get disenchanted and you lose the product somewhere along the way. In our case, we put together a chemist, a chemical engineer, and a marketing person right at the very beginning. And maybe the chemist in the beginning, in the research stage, was a group leader, and then eventually the chemical engineer took over, and then if we were successful from a marketing point of view, the marketing guy took over. And that helped us to be very successful with many of the projects we did. To give you another example, Steve Jobs, as you know, was fired. By the way, he was my neighbor in Palo Alto for 5 years, so I really got to know him. In 1996, he came back from Next because Apple decided to acquire the Next technology after he had been fired for several years. When he returned, there were 10 or 15 projects that were going on. He killed all of them except 5, and 4 of them were iTunes, iPod, iPad, and iPhone, and they were all successful. What did he do? They used to have a linear process. Product design would do something. They handed over the product development. This always failed. And so what he said is, look, I want people from product design, product development, and manufacturing and marketing all in the same team. They didn't like it, but as you know, Steve Jobs was a very determined guy, and he put these people on the same teams, and they were very successful. Number 6, create an early success. We learned this the hard way. If you're, as we were financed by venture capital. But even if you have any kind of investors, many times, especially venture capital investors, they want you to hit all home runs. They want you to do things that are going to change the world profoundly, very quickly. And so in our case, This led to us burning lots of cash. We were working on all home runs. And all of a sudden, our investors started to get a little antsy, and they were starting to lose interest. So I said to our management team, we need to do something else. We need to implement what I called a single strategy. We've got to hit a couple singles to show that our strategy, our technology, it really, really does work. And so what did we do? In 1992, we uncovered pharmaceuticals as an area that needed lots of help, and that our capability in catalytic technology could do that. And in 1 year, we were so successful that in 1993, we did an IPO on the NASDAQ, and then about a year and a half later, another follow-up public offering. We raised $200 million. We bought a plant in 1995 to show that we knew how to manufacture in East Palo Alto from Sandoz. It was a very small plant, but that filled up very quickly, and we needed more plant capacity. So we had to acquire another plant. We looked around, and in 1997, I found an incredibly wonderful plant. Today they're called GlaxoSmithKline. Back then it was Glaxo Wellcome. The problem was, in acquiring that plant, we had to basically change our strategy. In 1996, we needed this capacity, but if we wanted to acquire the Glaxo Wellcome plant, it was an immense challenge because it meant instead of just making the active ingredients for drugs, we were going to have to make the final drug all the way from the beginning to the final packaged drug. And we had never set that strategy. So we worked really hard with our board, and we decided that we could do it. We had an incredible board of directors, and those of you, I don't care whether you have a small company or a medium or a large company, I really encourage you to either have a board of advisors or a board of directors that are really, really good. We had Barry Bloom, who was an executive vice president for Pfizer, Ernie Mario, who had been the CEO of Glaxo, Paul Cook, who founded and built a multi-billion-dollar company called Raychem, Carl Gerasi, who discovered the birth control pill and was a chief scientist for Syntex and a professor at Stanford, Dick Fleming, who was the CEO of Air Products, and Tom Gutschell, who was the executive vice president of Syntex. So here's what happened. Here's Catalytica, our research team in Mountain View, California. This is a time when we wanted to make this challenge of moving to a new strategy. Our revenues were $16 million. We had 150 employees, the research people, and then down the street in East Palo Alto, there was the manufacturing plant. We needed this critical size to compete. So we decided to go after the Glaxo Wellcome plant. We succeeded in acquiring that plant against all odds, and against several multi-billion-dollar companies like Bayer in Germany and several other multi-billion-dollar companies. And here's what happened. Within 4 years, Catalytica Pharmaceuticals became, we had revenues, we went from 16 million to 500 million. Our profit was $16 million a year. We had a market value on the NASDAQ of more than $1 billion, and we had more than 2,000 employees. And then what happened was our biggest competitor, a company called DSM Pharmaceuticals in Holland, made the shareholders an offer they couldn't refuse. They paid a premium and bought the company. But at this time, we had a global customer base. We had all of the leading pharmaceutical companies that we were making drugs for, biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies. We made some of the major products that you know of, and we made more than, I guess, 60 drugs. And for example, we made Retrovir, which was the best drug for AIDS at the time. That was, and Valtrex, Zovirix, which are antivirals, Wellbutrin, which is the depression. We made almost the world supply of that for Glaxo Wellcome. We even made OTC, over-the-counter drugs like Sudafed, Neosporin, Actifed, and billions of tablets. So that was the success in Catalytica Pharmaceuticals. Number 8, support all your stakeholders. And I mentioned that earlier. And what I mean by stakeholders, number 1, above all, your employees. And I don't mean your customers first. I mean, if you take care of your employees, they will take care of your customers. Number 3, your investors. Number 4, your suppliers. Yes, develop really, really good relationships with your suppliers and your community. In East Palo Alto, which was a depressed area when we had our plant there, we tried to hire, and we did hire, most of our operators for our plant from East Palo Alto. We trained them, and that was a wonderful connection with our community to make a positive difference in the world. I'm going to leave you with a couple of slides right now, which is what I'm doing now, which is Chateau Mazzelli. And our dream, as I mentioned earlier, we really want to create a better world by enriching the lives of our guests and our employees both. So we're always trying to grow them both. And I think, Don, we probably can do the third polling question at this point. What do you think?
Sure. And the question is, an important interview tool in the hiring process is asking narrow, focused questions. And it's one of the things that I ask him I encourage our folks to do. One of my favorite questions in the hiring process, Jim, is to ask people what felt unfair to you at your last job. So I like doing the positive stuff, what's your journey, all that kind of routine, but I also want to know how they deal with things that feel unfair to them, because to me that defines people's personal culture. And so that open-ended question reveals a lot, and you do, as a Six Sigma trainer would do with either one of our questions, you drill down 5 whys, and then you'll really learn a lot about them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And one of the things you said, which is just amazing to me, and learning it because, I'm getting up there a little bit too, and that you get what you ask for in life, just not when or how you expect to get it.
Exactly.
And so everything that you've talked about so far, even if you're talking about corporate teams, that conversation applies to you as an individual. Any of you who are HR executives today, you might not be CEOs, but it applies, as Covey would say, to your circle of influence. You start where you are,
Exactly.
You start with you. and so
exactly. And I think also you want to lead a fulfilled life personally and professionally, but somehow you want to create an environment where the employees can do that. Because I have found when employees feel fulfilled, both personally and professionally, the company prospers because you get a tremendous amount of creativity, innovation, and hard work. I would say hard work, creative work that has a positive impact. Because you can have lots of people putting in lots of hours and they're really depressed, and they may not accomplish anything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So let me close the poll. Let me share the results. It's interesting. 29% said the narrow focus question is true. 71 said false. Now, again, as an interviewing tool, I think that the answer that you wanted was false. So,
right.
And by the way, we got a comment. Somebody said, I went on to your site about the chateau, and they wanted to know if you have any internships.
Well, we do, but the only problem is for that person is probably an English-speaking person, because at Chateau Mazzelli, the people who work here as interns, they speak one of 2 languages. They speak 2 languages. One is Czech, which is required, and the other is maybe German or English or something else. And the reason for that is 65% of our business comes from Czech, and the other 35% comes from other countries in the world.
So the screen is yours again.
Okay, so here's what we're trying to do, and I think we're doing a good job of it, but we're always trying to get better at it, is to create a better world by enriching the lives of our guests and our employees. Let me just give you a sense of the progress we've made. First of all, we have been voted several years in a row since we opened in 2006 as the world's leading green hotel. Now, we didn't do this to be voted the leading green hotel. It's just my wife and I personally wanted to do this, and the employees were behind it. We generate all of our own energy either through photovoltaics or burning biomass. We heat our swimming lake with the sun through a solar situation. We invested in a significant amount of insulation to manage the the hotel. So it's basically just our personal desire. We really want to have a minimal footprint on the planet, and so that has helped us tremendously. We also are the only 5-star hotel in the European Union that is allowed to use what is called the Eco label. There are really no other 5-star hotels that can use that label because of all of the criteria that we have met. We have an award-winning spa, and I would say not just in the Czech and Slovak republics, but in Central Europe. And we also have developed, my wife is the genius behind this. She developed her own line of Miceli Bouquet natural cosmetics. We have laboratories here where we synthesize and manufacture them. I, of course, have the chemical background, but my wife has been interested in cosmetics her entire life. So we use these in our spa, and we also sell them to the Mandarin Oriental, which is one of the leading hotels in the world, and they use it in their spas. We also decided we've built a great brand in Chateau Miceli, so we partner with companies like BMW, for example. They supply us with 3 new cars for our use and our customer use every 3 months, British Airways and Mandarin Oriental. We also formed a group called Chateau Miceli Forum, and Chateau Miceli Forum, we're beginning to teach inspired leadership to people here in the Czech Republic, and also beginning to branch out. We bring leading speakers from around the world to teach this, both here in the Czech Republic and to other folks that would come here. We have been voted one of the top 5 restaurants in the Czech Republic consistently. My wife has developed a new project called Princess Nellie of Chateau Miceli, which is a book she's written. It'll be published in September, and we've created a Princess Nellie suite here at the Chateau, and it's become very, very popular. So, and we've got a number of products. I want to come now to the summary because I want to leave time if there's any other questions or comments that you want to get into. But I would say the most important thing for you personally is to find your essence and help the world. Do something that makes a difference. And I have gone through this in great detail in the book if you haven't found it, or if you would like to reinforce it, how to do that, and how to create your own dream, something that really galvanizes your soul and makes you excited about what you do, because the name of the game is purpose, passion, and also patience. Don't expect to be an instant success overnight. Just enjoy the journey. And I would say follow the 8 steps that I just mentioned. You can't make a mistake. If you do those, you build a successful company. And as I said, enjoy the journey. So all of what I've said in much greater detail is in the book, Balance the Business Life Connection. You can go to the website, www.balancethebusinesslifeconnection.com, or www.jamescusmano.com. They both go to the same place. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share my excitement with you on engaging employees and the whole idea of work-life balance. Thanks so much. Are we still there, Don?
Okay, I'm
Hello?
sorry. No, I had myself muted, and I should have unmuted. Okay, so
okay.
Very quickly here, we've got 5 minutes. If anybody's got any questions, please ask. This is the time to do it. But I've got a couple. Okay, so we've been talking about HR in general in this program, and I bring folks on you to say, hey, look, this applies to HR. This, this same type of thinking. One of the challenges, if you were to see the profiles that I do, these psychometric profiles of HR executives, they tend to be very rules-oriented, very kind of in the box, very self-concerned. They want to do a very good job. They're very well-intended. And as many of those types of people, they're very sensitive to any judgment that comes their way. It can knock them off kilter very quickly, say more so than a salesperson who's used to constant rejection. So any HR people, when they criticize, can kind of crawl inward or fight out instead of being open to the criticism and feel what's going on there. So you've dealt with HR people in your role, president, CEO, that type of thing. What can you share that you learned about helping these HR people to get out of that, in a sense, rules box-oriented approach to things? Because what I hear from so many CEOs is that it's Department of No, Department of Hardly Relevant, that they're just very negative. Nobody wants to go in there because they're just going to be told what they can't do. How'd you kind of turn that around at your companies?
Well, yeah, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I think that the first thing what we did is in terms of hiring people in the HR function, we always tried to find people who were caring, empathy, compassion, those kinds of elements were much, much more important than somebody who was great at systems analysis, let's say, because you can always get systems analysis. But getting people who show authentic caring, but understand that there are certain guidelines that you can't do everything. There are guidelines, but people will respond. It's amazing. Somebody can come into HR, and if the element that they feel from the HR department is a caring one, look, I really care about you. I want to try to help you in any way I can. And, you know, there are certain guidelines and certain rules that we have to deal with and certain realities, but within that context, I want to think of whatever creative way I can to help you. When people feel that, they have no fear of going to HR. They also don't feel badly when they get a negative response from HR, especially when it's delivered in a compassionate way. And so I think my feeling is you've got to hire people in HR who really, really say, I'm going to do the job, but I'm going to do it in a way that shows the people that work with me or work in the company, I really care for them. I really like them. And, you know, people do amazing things when they feel they're cared for. That is probably the most underused secret in the whole world of profession, of work. And that is when you can demonstrate to people that you care about them, they will take a no, they will take I'm sorry, and they will take all kinds of things like that if they know that you truly and genuinely have tried to do the best you can for them.
You know, you're preaching to the choir here. One of the way I phrase it a lot of times is you can unconditionally care or love for people. That doesn't mean you have to have unconditional relationships with them.
Right.
So don't get the two confused. You know, even no matter what the law says, no matter what the bottom line says, treat them as you would want a loved one to be treated. You know.
Exactly. I mean, you know, think about your children. I mean, you know, we all find it challenging to raise children, and I've got 3 daughters, they're all different. But on the other hand, there's many times when you have to say no, and if you say no to them in the right way and they know you really care and love them, somehow they get through that. They get through it. And I think employees are the same way. If they know you care about them, and you have to say no, or this is not possible, and let me tell you why. I hope you understand. Maybe under different circumstances we can do this, or maybe we can do partially part of it. If they see that you're stretching to try to do whatever you can and you genuinely care for them, they'll go the whole 9 yards and listen to you.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And Jim, this is how I want to wrap it up for you. I know you're a busy guy. I couldn't appreciate this more. I've gotten some wonderful comments from everybody. I know a couple of people are going to go get that book right away. And I'm sure a lot of them, if they haven't been on your website, it is, by the way, anybody, go check out the hotel's website. It is awesome. And I hope to go visit it someday. How's that?
Well, yeah, if any of you folks come to Prague, just drop me an email. It's jim@chateaumazelli.com. I'd be very happy to see if I can get you a VIP price to introduce you to the castle.
That's awesome. And one last final comment here. You're one of the few guys that beat me in my spread. So my oldest son is 34, my youngest is 11. So you've got me by even a couple of years on both sides.
You know, my youngest daughter, she just turned 7 on June 30th. I took her today to lunch, and she said, you know, Dad, you know, these kids say the darndest things. She said, Dad, I've been thinking about this. I want you to live long enough to dance at my wedding. What do you think? I said, I said, Julia, I think I'll do that.
If you keep up the vigor that you have, I'm sure there'll be no problem. All right. Hey, good, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Those of you listening again, if you want your HRCI credit, it's just dana@hrthatworks.com. And as always, I'm going to make myself the presenter. I'm going to show you a couple of things on HR That Works that I think apply to some of what we spoke to today. So let me do that. First, we'll start the recording.